how can we fix spring football? How can we keep spring games? Because everyone's canceling right now. We got Matt Rule saying there's no spring game. We got Steve Sarkisian saying there's no spring game. Ole Miss a year ago just went straight up Pro Bowl games on us. And I appreciate the Pro Bowl games. I appreciate the effort. But how can we salvage what spring football, what spring games are for us as college football sickos? We'll unpack that together. So to give you a broad picture as to how I'm putting this segment together when we're sitting down and talking this thing through, whenever we do a how to fix it segment, the bullet points for me are, okay, what would I want fixed? What do I like that needs to stay? What don't I like that needs to be adjusted? And it's a pretty short list, y'all. I want to keep spring college football game broadcasts on our televisions, and I want us to try to limit spring transfer portal madness. Not that I don't appreciate the portal, but I would like us to have maybe a little bit less volume after spring practice finishes up. So we'll start with that first issue we're going to address. Y'all, you want spring football on your TVs. We want spring football on our TVs. But the problem is, as every coach is speaking to right now, if you have a spring football game and it's on ESPN Plus or it's on Big Ten Network or it's on Fox, whatever it's on, guess what? If we can watch it, every other coach in America can watch it. And in some ways, it'd be malpractice to not evaluate somebody else's roster when they give you the chance to go do that on national television. So, Coach Rule is saying, hey, I got guys jumping in the portal or saying they're getting calls from other teams the day after our spring game was just on national TV. So he's saying if that's going to happen, if we're going to put ourselves out there in a spot where more people can try and poach our roster, a quick fix for that for us is we don't have a spring game. You don't get to see our game. And so in that way, we get to help retain our roster a little bit better. And in other ways, probably help keep your pocketbook in better shape as well when it comes to players trying to leverage what they're getting offered post-spring game. So my solution to this is honestly a pretty simple one. I would love for us to live in a world where if you play in your spring football game, you can play all spring practice, go 1 through 14 on practices, but if you play in practice 15, which is the spring game, you are not allowed to enter into the spring transfer portal. Okay? So if you want to hit the portal, you can do that, but it better be before practice 15. So what this would do is, if you are playing in the spring game, you're telling the coach, hey, I'm in. Hey, I'm all about this. But JD, how are we going to police this? Like, guys are going to play in the spring game, but then they're going to jump into the portal whether you tell them they can or can't. If you do jump into the spring transfer portal after playing in the spring game, there's got to be some sort of sit-out period. Now, what that perfect number is, I don't know. We kicked around the idea of 6 games. I think that'd be enough to probably keep guys from playing in the game and then also jumping in the portal. We could do a full season if we wanted to be super stingy about it. There's got to be some consequences for playing in the spring game than jumping into the portal. If that doesn't exist, okay, we can have a spring game. And to be real too, like, some folks will push back and say, well, JD, the spring game is important for evaluating your own roster, isn't it? Yes and no. Like, for most of college football, I think spring is primarily for like setting the table for fall camp. Like, you can win a job in the spring, but more often than not, you're going to actually solidify winning that job with the lead up to the season. So spring football as a whole, like, I'll tell you all a secret too, the spring game in of itself is not really a chance for you to evaluate who you have on your roster. It's a chance to evaluate some depth pieces, but there's a reason why you don't see the starting quarterback play the entirety of the spring game more often than not, because you already know what he is. Also, you've seen him all spring practice. Like, practice 15 is a celebration of what spring football has been for your team. It's a celebration of that phase of the year coming to a close. So, all in all, man, like, a lot of teams will have a pretty intense scrimmage even before you get to the spring game. Like, I think Ohio State has a massive is the wrong word, a massively important sort of scrimmage that they have behind closed doors, either the practice before or right before they have their spring game. They're doing their evaluation during that period. So, to put it simply, if you cannot play in the spring game and then jump in the spring portal, I think that would give us the opportunity to still have spring games on the TV, my own opinion. The other thing I want fixed, I appreciate the transfer portal, but as I mentioned, I don't want to see just a massive number when it comes to spring entries into the transfer portal. What I'm okay with in the spring transfer portal is guys battling for a job and then clearly figuring out during the course of 15 practices, hey, you know what? I'm probably not going to start next year. I need to start. So for that reason, coach, I appreciate you so much. I don't have the role I want to have here. I'm going to jump in the portal. At that point, okay, it hurts the depth, obviously, of the team, but I think at that point for the kid, it's fair to have some player mobility there and for him to have the best college career he can have somewhere else. What I'm not a fan of is in the 10-day window, a kid is going back and forth with some other school through a back channel and leveraging a certain NIL dollar amount that he could get somewhere else against his current school that he's at. Like, that to me is not what the portal was built for. And so my solution to this is, let's shrink the transfer portal window in the spring. It's already at 10 days. Let's make it 5 days. You don't need 10 days to decide if you're going to stay somewhere or not, especially if it's for a playing time or a development conversation. If it's a money conversation, yeah, 10 days probably helps you. Why? Because you can go 9 days in a row and have this back and forth and keep bumping up the price. What that does, while it obviously, I think, in some ways benefits your pocketbook, it hurts your team. It hurts your staff. Like, these coaches are trying to figure out if they're going to have their starting linebacker or not. And then by the last day of the transfer portal, he tells them he's leaving. Well, guess what? The transfer portal at that point in time, for the most part, a lot of the top talent has started to dry up. I don't have somebody to go backfill your position with. So in that way, the quality of football kind of starts to deteriorate a little bit, and not something that we're necessarily in the business of rooting for. One more thing I'll say here, having a 5-day window as opposed to a 10-day window, the strain that personnel departments feel in college football year-round is just stupid. Number of hours they work, the things they're asked to do during the portal window, during the recruiting seasons, like, it is next level. We're going to, and already are, starting to see really good people in the college football personnel world decide to go do something else. Whether it's the corporate world or, more often than not, the NFL, like, let's keep good people in college football. And minimizing this window, I think, even though seems like a small change, I think it would provide a little bit more margin, and I think it would maybe help us keep some of those people, like I just mentioned, in college football. So the thing that's tricky about this, where we're heading now with spring football, is best case scenario, we get some Pro Bowl games on the TV from every other school, and I'm not even against that, but it's not the same as 11-11 football. Worst case, we get nothing. Worst case, we go to OTAs, and I'll walk this through a little further. If we go to OTAs instead of mandatory spring football, that doesn't help the product either. Like, obviously, it hurts the fans. Like, we don't get to watch OTAs on our TV. It's not a TV product. But if your transfer quarterback, John Mateer, is going through OTAs, and he may or may not have the entirety of his offense in OTAs with him, it doesn't help him when it comes time to play the football games. It doesn't help Oklahoma, and maybe a top receiver is holding out by not going to OTAs and he wants more NIL money. It doesn't help anybody. So you see where I'm going with this. Overall, like, this is what's best for us as fans, yes, but I think also for the product that college football is, keeping spring practice and keeping spring games as a whole pretty intact is what I think is best for the sport when we look at the big picture here. So, Cato and I have got this campaign going. You've heard the Just Say No campaign. Just say no to poaching in the spring. If you want to poach in the fall, be my guest. Tamper all you want. Why? Because we have college football games being played. And those guys aren't, more often than not now, leaving those rosters in the middle of the season. Do it then. Don't do it during the spring. Let us enjoy 11-11 football. I don't care if the quarterback's wearing a non-contact jersey or not. We're asking all of you, college football coaches, college football personnel people, just say no to spring poaching. All right? Your move. And, I think, Kato, we get enough signatures on that thing, bro. I think we might be able to end spring tampering for all of us, is the hope, man. You know, it takes a village. It takes a village, but it starts with 2 guys in a studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Speaking of being in the studio, we also have a podcast product for you. So subscribe to that feed as well. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you type in the Hard Count with JD PicKell. Got a pretty good volume of content over there for you. We have this show twice a week. We got our Sunday Sprint podcast on there for you. So I'm just saying now, check it out, and might find some other things there as well that you enjoy. So appreciate y'all being dialed in there.